Hey YouTube, and welcome back to another episode of Tools on Tools. I'm Reese, and today we're going to go through a bit of a basic. We're getting back to the basics for all you guys out there, or girls that are just about to tackle a project at home, and that's how to use a circular saw and what sort of setup do you need for what you're going to do. Now here in front of me I've got my circular saw setup. This is what I use every day on the job site. It's very, very powerful, very, very good. It's a DeWalt 54 volt, and of course it's battery powered, and that requires a charger. So that's my setup. It's quite a pricey setup, but it works for me. For you, maybe if you're only doing a few little things, then maybe a cheaper little cordless tool might be the go for you, something from the Ryobi range. But for me, I needed something heavy duty, so I got the DeWalt. Now, this setup here cost me around $560 Australian, and it's pretty pricey, but I'm getting the mileage out of it. I'm using it for what it was made for. So there's a few little basics when it comes to a circular saw. One, we'll start here at the handle. So on the handle there is a safety button, and you've also got your trigger, and that turns the circular saw on. That's literally the first thing you need to know about operating the circular saw. The second thing you need to know is how to grip it. Now there's a few age-old questions between some of the old timers and the new generation about safety, and one of them is gripping it with two hands. So we have a handle here for your left hand, and you've got your grip here for your right, and you want to grip it quite firmly. Now there is a bit of an age-old question, especially doing quick cuts where you could do it one-handed, but in all honesty, with these things kicking back and the amount of power they have, it's probably not the best idea. They are very safe because they do have a guard on over the blade, and this moves out of the way as you're cutting through timber. Now on the bottom of the circular saw, we of course have the sliding plate here. Now this is a metal plate or a steel plate. I'm not sure, but yeah, if you're doing a lot of work, you want something that's going to be nice and smooth. Definitely not plastic, and it'll slide along the wood, and it's adjustable. It's fully adjustable according to what depth you want to cut it at. DeWalt is very, very easy. It has a little locking wing over here, and you release it, and that allows you to drop it down to what you need, almost to nothing. So if we close that off there, we can stand it up, and it's free of the blade. But of course, when you're setting it up for a cut, you want to get your timber beside the blade and drop that down to where you need it. That way you just want to be barely cutting through it, just for safety reasons. Another feature that DeWalt has, and it comes with the kit, is this little vacuum shroud here. It's a couple of screws, you put it on yourself. I did find, however, at the back there's a screw here that's very, very tricky to get in. I don't know what DeWalt was doing there, but I believe they messed up a little bit in the design. Now getting back to the base plate, not only is the back of it adjustable, the front, the bevel for your angled cuts is also adjustable. So it's got, again, another little lever here that you pull towards you, and it's quite a hard one because I haven't used that in quite a while, but that allows you to adjust it to exactly where you need it. Now on the DeWalt, they do have, it goes all the way from a 57 degree all the way back to 0, but most people are only going to need the 45, and it does lock into place with a little grip at the back here, and you can see it lock in at 45. And of course you rotate the mechanism here, that way it's firmly locked into place, and away you go. I'll take that back. Another cool thing that DeWalt has done is onboard storage for the blade removal tool, and that's right here behind the battery. It's just a little nut remover. It's quite nice. It's got their logo on the back of it, and it's also got a bit of an angle, that way you can get onto the blade. Now when changing the blade, it is essential that you remove the battery. The chances of the blade turning on while you're removing, the circular saw turning on while you're removing the blade is incredibly small, but safety first, always remove the battery. Then on DeWalt, they have a little locking pin on the front here. It's quite easy to find. Now what you want to do is rotate the blade by hand while depressing that switch, and you'll feel it lock into place. Once it's locked into place, you can take your tool here and you can remove the blade. So it's yeah, very, very easy to do. Now another thing about circular saws, especially when it comes to getting yourself a correct cut, is using something called a fence. Now this here is the fence. It's just a little bit of steel. It's a little bit of flat steel, and it's got another little edge on the bottom here that allows it to line up with the straight edge of the timber. Now this is good for cuts as far as I can see, all the way up to 250 mil, and that slides right into this little groove here, and then it's secured into place by a little turn knob right here, and it shouldn't go anywhere, but that should give you quite a straight cut, and then away you go. And removing it is just like that, but of course, yes, it's fully adjustable. So on the front here, it also has some measurements here. So DeWalt's included some quick measurements, so you can work out how far you need to cut. It's also got some pretty good indicators here for where the blade goes. So you've got your straight, your 0 degree right here. So that's 0 degree is flat, and you've also got a 45 degree indicator here for when you're cutting your angled timber. So that's a great inclusion. Now, because it is a cordless tool, it does come with a battery, and these guys here, it's something to consider when you buy a circular saw, is the capacity of the battery and what you're going to be doing. I have a host of batteries all the way up to 12 amps, so I've covered myself as far as batteries are concerned. But for the average home goer, if you're just doing a few little projects, it's always best to keep a couple. That way, if it does die, you're not disappointed that you have to wait an epic, especially on these basic chargers. The smallest flex volt, which is what's required for this, the smallest flex volt battery takes nearly an hour to charge. There are quick chargers, which you'll probably want to buy because these do get quite hot, the basic chargers. They're really only meant for the 18 volt. It doesn't actually specify on the top that it can charge 54 volt, but because these are backwards compatible, you can put them on there. But like I said, it takes a very long time to charge these, so make sure you've got a couple of batteries or at least a quick charger. That way you're not at the disappointment of buying a cordless circular saw. So that's one thing to consider. Alright, so we'll get into a few basics of cutting. Setting yourself up for the cut, and a few little pro tips for you guys out there that have never used it before. So we'll get into that. Alright, so the next step is to, of course, get your timber ready, and get it ready in a way that it's going to be stable and put while you make your cut. You don't want your timber to move, you want the saw to move. So for this demonstration, I'm just going to use this bit of ply board here, and of course you want to use some clamps. I'm using these Hart clamps. They're quick clamps, and they're absolutely fantastic. They've just a quick squeeze in, and of course they've got a little release mechanism down here. They're great for fixing your timber and just keeping it in place while making a cut, and you can do it nice and fast. So we'll just grab our piece here, and we'll chuck a couple clamps on it. Now, of course, you don't want your clamps to get in the way while you're making your cut, so position it in a way where your clamps are going to be out of the way. So I'm just going to put mine onto the side here, That's done. And we'll put another one right here. Now, of course, I could have used the other side of the table, but I'm just going to make a small cut. But you can see, of course, even on my rickety work table here, it stays put just nicely. So we'll grab our saw. Now remember, always set your blade up to exactly where you need your the blade to go, the depth. So, and of course, where DeWalt's got their little wing back here, and roll the blade guard forward and hold it in place. And what you want to do is position it over the timber, like so. And it might be a bit hard to see on camera, but you basically want it to just cut through the timber there. That might be a little bit easier to see, but yes, position it over the timber so that it just cuts through. I've got a little bit more, so it's not to worry. And of course, I'm using a cordless circular saw, so I've got to put a battery into it. And now my saw is ready to go. So before you make the cut, make sure you've got a good grip on your saw. Make sure that you've got your front handle here positioned, and of course your trigger finger ready to make the cut. So what you want to do is line it up with the 0 on your blade. That's of course in line with the saw blade, unless you're making a 45-degree cut. So then the next step is to just depress your unlock trigger, and then turn it on with your main trigger here. And that's it. Nice and even. Make sure nothing gets in your way when you're making a cut. Make sure it flows really, really nicely. The next step to making a cut. Now this is just a little bit of a quick cut. So if you're just cleaning timber up on site, or you need to do some form work for concrete, you're not going to really worry about it being straight. You just want to get it where you need it. And using a quick cut and just using the guide on the front is a perfect way to do that. Now what I'll do is I'll take the battery out, and I'll set it up with a piece of pine, and I'll show you another pro tip. This is what we call a speed square. This is great to chuck in your nail bag, and it's really, really handy when you want to get your 45 degrees. And of course do a quick few markings. But one thing that not many people use it for, which is actually a great idea, is because it's got this little edge here, this little straight edge, you can also use it with your circular saw. So say we wanted to grab this here and make a quick line there, and we wanted to cut this piece here. So what we would do is we'd line it up here. And this of course comes down to a little bit of practice, because circular saws are meant to be used two-handed, but if you're pretty handy with a saw, you can of course use one. Now we'll set our depth. I'll just set it down to about there, and what we'll do is we'll take our saw, line it up at our marking there, and then hold this here against the edge of the timber. And then, of course, you can push through just like that, along that edge. So line it up, hold it tight, and then you could go straight through by running the saw up against the edge here. Another pro tip for all you YouTubers out there too, and all you first home renovators or do-it-yourselfers tackling that next project. The next tip is what we call a plunge cut. Now that's to get yourself a nice straight cut. Now before, doing that was just, freehand. That was just going along with a set line and hoping for the best. A steady hand will of course always get you a straight cut, but there are a lot of other ways to get very good cuts very easily. So for example, say we wanted to just mark a line here and we wanted to cut along that line. A circular saw, as you enter the timber, we'll just quickly clamp this down. Now, as you enter the timber, a circular saw is always now this is just a quick setup. As you enter the saw, enter the timber here with the saw, and you line it up perfectly with this line here, and you can see it follows all the way through. But you want to line that up perfectly. Now sometimes the back end might not be as straight as the front of what you think you're looking at. So a quick way to do that is a plunge cut, and I'll demonstrate that for you now. Now a plunge cut requires you to be a little bit experienced, and what I mean by that is knowing how to hold the saw when you're doing this. So a plunge cut requires you to hold open the guard here. Now what I recommend doing is lining up your 0 degree with the line. Starting back here, you want the width of the blade to, of course, end up at the end of the timber here. So bring that forward there, line that up perfectly over at the front there, and see how the blade is sitting perfectly on the line there. Now what you want to do is rotate the blade up, turn it on, and you can see there that I've just skimmed the line. So it's perfectly on the line. I've just skimmed it with the blade the same way you would do it with a drop saw. You would skim the timber, that way you know exactly that you're cutting on the line. So once you've done that, and you know that you're on the line, the next step, of course, is to plunge all the way through. And you can see there that I'm perfectly on the line, and that's going to give me a nice straight cut. Another way to do it, of course, is with the fence, but that's not always going to work, especially if the timber is nice and wide. Then you're not going to be able to use that. Alright guys, that concludes the video for today. I hope you learned something about the circular saw here. That's absolutely fantastic machine. And once you've got the basics down, they're incredibly easy to use, and they'll help you along with your little projects. Now, of course, hit that subscribe button. It always helps the channel out, helps me grow, makes this all worthwhile. There's a few more how-to videos coming your way, so hit that bell notification as well. That way, if you're at home and you're tackling these little projects and you want to know how to use another tool, maybe it'll be coming up in the next couple of weeks, so always look out for that. Of course, chuck a comment below. I love feedback for the channel, and it helps us grow, helps this channel become better for you guys at home. And of course, have a good night, and I'll see you on the next one.